My own brother, Brendan, stabbed me down across that boardroom table, his words fresh ideas. Not all blood, the death sentence to my career. The betrayal was a blade to the heart. 22 years of my life vanished in that single, cold-blooded moment. You know, Whitman and Sons, that name was etched into my soul long before I could even swing a ham straight. I grew up breathing in the scent of fresh-cut lumber and wet concrete, the clang of steel on steel, the soundtrack of my childhood. While other kids were playing video games, I was out there on site with Dad, a miniature hard hat perched on my head, learning the business from the ground up. Every beam we raised, every foundation we poured, I felt it like it was part of my own DNA. I knew the grit, the sweat, the sheer hard work that built our family's legacy because I'd lived it. I loved the honesty of it, the way you couldn't fake a solid structure. Brendan, though, he was always different. He preferred the polished gleam of a boardroom to the honest dust of a job site. While I was mastering the practical, learning every nut and bolt, every nuance of the trade from guys who'd been doing it for decades, Brendan was off chasing fancy degrees. He'd come back from those big city internships, talking about synergy and leveraging assets, words that felt alien on my tongue. He'd look at my calloused hands with this faint, almost pitying smile. Ethan, you're the heart of this company, he'd say, but it always felt like he was talking about an old, reliable engine, not the guy who actually knew how to fix it. Dad, bless his soul, he dreamed of us running it together. He saw us as a perfect pair, my hands-on experience, my deep understanding of the nuts and bolts, perfectly complemented by Brendan's slick presentation skills and business school polish. You're the bedrock, Ethan, he'd tell me, his eyes shining with pride. And Brendan, he'll build the skyscrapers on top. It was a beautiful dream, and for a while, I believed in it too. I wanted to. How could I not? It was Dad's vision. But the signs, oh, they were there, all right, subtle at first, like hairline cracks in a new sidewalk. I just didn't want to see them, I guess. Or maybe I told myself it was just Brendan being Brendan. Ambitious. Driven. That's what I'd tell myself. He's just eager Ethan, he wants to make his mark. But it was more than that. It was the way he gently steered conversations in meetings away from my operational insights towards his grander, often vaguer, strategic plans. The way he'd start handling the bigger client communications, telling me he'd loop me in, but the loop always seemed to get smaller and smaller. I remember one time, we were looking over blueprints for the Miller account, a massive project I'd personally nutted out the logistics for. Brendan waltzed in, fresh from some conference, and started talking about redesigning the facade, something completely unnecessary, something that would blow the budget sky high. When I pointed out the practical impossibilities, the cost overruns, he just gave me that look, that patient, condescending smile. Ethan, sometimes you have to spend money to make money. Think bigger picture. My gut screamed that his bigger picture was all about him, not the company, not the years of solid, dependable work that had gotten us here. It felt like he was slowly, methodically painting me into a corner, making me look like some old dinosaur, resistant to change, while he was the bright, shiny future. The ice was closing in, long before that final, fatal boardroom meeting. And fool that I was, I kept telling myself my own brother couldn't actually push me out into the cold. I walked out of that boardroom, the click of my dress shoes on the polished floor echoing way too loud in the sudden, awful silence. Fresh ideas, not old blood, Brendan had said. My own brother. The words kept replaying, a sick, scratchy record in my head. 22 years. 22 years I'd poured my sweat, my heart, held my very soul into Whitman and Sons, and just like that, I was all blood. Discarded. Obsolete. My fists were clenched so tight the knuckles were white, but I kept my back straight, my head high. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Not then. Not ever. The elevator ride down felt like an eternity. Each floor we passed was a layer of my life being peeled away. All those late nights, the weekend sacrifice, the sheer bone-deep exhaustion I'd felt so many times, only to get up and do it all over again because it was Astor's company. Dad's legacy. Astor's my asterisk legacy. Or so I'd thought. The storm inside me wasn't just brewing anymore, it was a full-blown hurricane, threatening to rip me apart. Anger, betrayal, a grief so profound it felt like a physical weight on my chest. But beneath it all, something else was starting to spark. A cold, hard resolve. If Brendan thought he could just erase me, he had another thing coming. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He'd always underestimated me, seeing me as just the grease monkey brother, good with his hands but not with the bigger picture. He was about to get a very rude awakening about just how big my picture could be. You see, while Brendan was busy sharpening his corporate knives and practicing his condescending smiles, I hadn't been entirely idle. Those cracks I'd seen in the sidewalk, I hadn't just ignored them. I'd started quietly laying a new foundation, a contingency plan. A just-in-case that had slowly, steadily become a goddamn necessity. My own company. JW Buildworks. Named it after Dad, John Whitman. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brendan had tried to steal Dad's legacy. I was going to preserve the best parts of it, the asterisk real asterisk parts. Over the past year, as Brendan's maneuvers became more blatant, his intentions clearer, I'd been having quiet conversations. Lunches, after work beers, site visits. Not with just anyone, but with the clients who knew asterisk me. The ones who remembered who crawled under a busted piece of machinery in the rain to get a project back on track. The ones who'd called asterisk my asterisk cell, not the main office, when they had a problem because they knew Ethan Whitman delivered. People like old man Harrison from Harrison Holdings, or Sarah Jenkins from Apex Developments. They valued straight talk and solid work, not buzzwords and empty promises. I didn't badmouth Brendan, not directly. I didn't have to. They'd seen the changes at Whitman and Sons too. They'd felt the shift from a family-run business built on trust to something colder, more corporate. I just let them know that if things ever went south for me there, I wouldn't be leaving the industry. That I'd always be there for them. The day after that boardroom execution, the silence from Brendan was deafening. He probably figured I was at home, licking my wounds, maybe crying into my coffee. Let him. I was busy. Making calls. Finalizing paperwork. JW Buildworks wasn't just a name on a piece of paper anymore. It was real. And those clients? They weren't just sympathetic, they were ready to jump. It took 3 days. 3 agonizingly long, yet strangely exhilarating days. I kept my phone close, waiting. Then, on Thursday afternoon, it rang. Caller ID, Brendan Whitman. My heart gave a thump, not of fear, but of anticipation. I let it ring a few extra times before answering, calm and steady. Ethan Whitman speaking. His voice on the other end was different. Gone was the smooth, confident CEO tone. This was ragged, high-pitched, laced with a panic I'd never heard from him before. Ethan, what the hell is going on? Harrison Holdings just pulled the city centre project. They said they were going with asterisk. I took a slow breath, savouring it. That's right, Brendan, they are. And Apex, Sarah Jenkins just terminated the warehouse contract. She's citing a new preferred vendor agreement with JW Buildworks. What asterisk is asterisk JW Buildworks? Ethan, what have you done? The sheer, unadulterated terror in his voice, it was a symphony. Multi-million-dollar contracts asterisk taken for granted. Contracts he'd assumed were tied to the Whitman and Sons name, not to the man who actually made them happen, were vanishing before his eyes. I could almost see him pacing his fancy office, the expensive suit suddenly feeling too tight, the polished gleam of his boardroom table reflecting a very ugly reality. JW Buildworks, Brendan, I said, my voice even, almost gentle, is my new company, and it seems some of our former most loyal clients prefer fresh ideas and old blood, especially when the old blood knows how to actually get the job done. The silence on his end was thick with disbelief and dawning horror. And right then, in that moment, hearing the carefully constructed world of my treacherous brother begin to crumble, that was the first sweet taste of vindication. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. It was about proving that integrity and hard work still meant something. And Brendan, he was just starting to understand the price of his betrayal. But that sweet taste of vindication, it turned bitter fast. Brendan wasn't the type to just roll over and die. Oh no. He was a fighter, alright, especially when his back was against the wall. And this time, he came out swinging like a wounded animal, all teeth and claws. The very next morning, a sleek, intimidating envelope landed on my doorstep, hand delivered. Official looking, embossed with the name of some high-powered law firm I'd never heard of. Cease and desist. Breach of fiduciary duty. Tortious interference. A whole slew of legal jargon basically screaming, I'm going to sue you into oblivion, Ethan. My stomach clenched. Lawsuits I hadn't factored in the sheer, unadulterated malice Brendan was capable of unleashing. This wasn't just business anymore, this was scorched earth. But the legal threats, as terrifying as they were just the opening salvo. The real attack, the one that hit me right where I lived, started about an hour later. My phone, which had been a source of triumph just days before, turned into an instrument of torture. It started with a call from Mike Ramirez Concrete. We went way back. Ethan, man, I got a call from Brendan Whitman, he stammered, his voice tight with discomfort. He strongly advised against working with JW Buildworks, said there were irregularities, potential legal entanglements. Irregularities, Mike, you know me, that's bull? I know, Ethan, I know, but he basically threatened to pull all of Whitman and Sons' future contracts with us if we took on your stuff. I got guys relying on me, Ethan, mortgages to pay. I can't risk it. I'm so sorry. Fleck. My blood ran cold. Asterisk he wouldn't. Asterisk, but he did. Then came another. Jenny from Apex Electrical. Ethan, sweetheart, I love you, you know I do, but Brendan's playing hardball. He mentioned your questionable departure and hinted that associating with you could damage your reputation with other major developers. Her voice was genuinely pained, but the message was the same. She was out, one after another. The calls kept coming. Allied Plumbing, Precision Steel, Old Man Hennock from Hemlock Lumber, who'd bounced me on his knee when I was a kid. Each conversation was like a fresh tap wound. These weren't just supplies. These were people I'd built relationships with over decades, people I'd shared beers with, helped out of jams, trusted, and Brendan, like a cornered, venomous snake, was systematically poisoning every well I'd ever dug. My office, the nerve center of my fledgling dream, suddenly felt like a vise, the walls physically closing in. The initial rage was being choked out by a rising tide of panic. My carefully laid plans, my network, my reputation, he was shredding it all with a few well-placed, venomous calls. So I slammed my fist on the desk, the pain barely registering. Damn you, Brendan. Damn you to hell. I remembered him as a kid, the way he'd always had to win, no matter the cost. Breaking his own toys if he thought I might get to play with them next. The subtle digs, the condescending remarks that I'd brushed off for years. How could I have been so blind to the depths of his ruthlessness? This wasn't just business rivalry, this was a personal vendetta fueled by a desperate, narcissistic rage. My chest ached, a hollow, sickening feeling spreading through me. Was this it? Was JW Buildworks going to die before it even had a chance to breathe? All those clients who put their faith in me, Harrison, Sarah Jenkins, I'd be forced to go back to them, tail between my legs, and tell them I couldn't deliver. The shame of it was a physical weight. He was trying to strangle my company in his cradle, to make an example out of me, to prove that no one crossed Brendan Whitman. The phone rang again. I stared at it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Each ring felt like another nail being hammered into my coffin. For a horrifying, gut-wrenching moment, I actually considered not answering. Maybe if I just ignored it, the nightmare would stop. But I knew it wouldn't. He was out there, relentless, and right then, in the suffocating silence between those rings, I felt his ruthless campaign working. I felt my dreams, my father's true legacy, slipping through my fingers like sand. The ringing phone was still screaming at me when there was a rap on my office door, sharp and sudden. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Standing there, his face a mask of worry I'd never seen on him before, not even when Mom had her big surgery, was Dad. He didn't wait for me to say anything, just pushed his way in, his eyes darting around like he was expecting Brendan to pop out from behind a filing cabinet. "Ethan," he said, his voice low and gravelly, like he'd been gargling rocks. "Son, we gotta talk, right now." The blare of the phone seemed to fade into the background. A different kind of alarm bell was going off in my head now, loud and insistent. He slumped into the client chair, and God, he looked 100 years old. My dad, always the strongest man I knew, the one who could frame a house in his sleep, looked broken. "Dad, what's wrong? Is Mom okay?" My gut twisted. He waved a dismissive hand, but his gaze was heavy, so heavy. "She's fine, Ethan. It's Whitman and Sons. It's Brendan." A bitter, harsh laugh escaped me. "Oh, you're telling me asterisk. The little psycho is trying to bury me. Dad, he's calling every supplier I've ever worked with, threatening them, spreading lies. He's out of his damn mind." I felt the familiar rage start to bubble up again. But Dad just looked at me, and there was this expression of pity. No, something deeper, something that made a chill run down my spine despite the anger. "Ethan," he said, leaning forward, his voice barely above a whisper, like he was afraid the damn walls were listening. It's worse than that, son, so much worse." He took a deep, shaky breath. "The company, Whitman and Sons, Ethan, it's a house of cards. Brendan, God forgive me, but that boy has run us straight into the ground." The air left my lungs. What are you, Dad? That's impossible." "They're huge." Brendan's always crowing about record profits, new markets. I remembered his smug pronouncements at family dinners, the condescending way he'd talk about modernizing the company. "All lies?" "Smoke and mirrors, son," Dad said, his voice thick with a sorrow that was terrifying to witness. "He's leveraged everything, every asset, every future projection, loans from places I wouldn't send my worst enemy. He called it aggressive growth strategy. I call it gambling with our family's legacy." His hand, callous from decades of hard work, trembled slightly as he rubbed his temples. "He's been juggling books, son, for God knows how long. The banks are starting to ask questions he can't answer. Auditors are sniffing around." My mind was reeling, trying to catch up. Brendan, the golden child, the one with the fancy degrees and the silver tongue, a fraud. A failure? It didn't compute. But how is he still operating, if it's that bad? And then Dad looked at me, his eyes locking onto mine, and the next words he spoke felt like a punch to the gut, knocking all the air out of me, stealing the very ground beneath my feet. "You, Ethan," he said, his voice cracking. "Your clients, the ones who left with you, Harrison, the Jenkins woman, that big development out by Miller's Creek, those were the only solid, profitable contracts left in the books for Whitman and Sons. They were the only things propping the whole damn charade up." A cold, sickening clarity washed over me. My blood turned to ice. Brendan's insane, vicious campaign against me, it wasn't just pride. It wasn't just spite or bruised ego. Oh, that was part of it, sure, but this was pure, unadulterated panic. He wasn't just trying to destroy Asterisk, my Asterisk dream. He was desperately trying to save his own skin, to call back the only things keeping Asterisk, his Asterisk entire corrupt empire, from crashing down around his ears. Those calls, those threats, they were the frantic thrashings of a drowning man, trying to pull me under with him to plug the holes in his sinking ship before the whole world saw what a catastrophic mess he'd made of our grandfather's legacy. He wasn't just trying to ruin me, he was fighting for his goddamn life. And just like that, the rage that had been a fire in my gut for weeks, for months really, cooled to a slow, deliberate ember. He wasn't some mastermind villain, he was a terrified kid playing with matches in a warehouse full of dynamite. My dynamite, apparently. A strange kind of calm settled over me. The panic was his, not mine anymore. My business, JW Buildworks, was solid, built on real relationships, real skill, not smoke and mirrors. He needed Asterisk me Asterisk. The irony wasn't lost on me, believe me. So, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, the words forming in my mind even as I spoke them, he needs my clients to stay afloat, he needs Asterisk me Asterisk to not expose him for the fraud he is. Dad just nodded, his face a roadmap of exhaustion and a grief so profound it was hard to look at. This was his son too, after all, even if Brendan had stomped all over his trust and nearly torpedoed the company his own father had poured his life into. And in that moment, staring at my dad, seeing the weight of it all on his shoulders, something shifted inside me. The bloodlust, the raw desire to see Brendan crash and burn, it didn't vanish, not entirely, but it was tempered. This wasn't just about me and Brendan anymore. This was about Whitman and Sons, the legacy my grandfather built, the name my dad had upheld with integrity for decades. Did I want to be the one to hammer the final nail into its coffin, just to watch Brendan squirm? I thought back to that boardroom, Brendan's smug face, his dismissive words, fresh ideas, not old blood. The sting was still there, a dull ache. But then I thought of Grandpa Whitman, his callous hands showing me how to frame a wall when I was just a boy, the smell of sawdust and honest labor that had been the scent of my childhood. No, I wouldn't let Brendan drag all of that down with him. But I sure as hell wasn't going to let him off the hook either. The next few days were a blur of tense meetings. Lawyers, accountants, Dad looking like a ghost, and Brendan. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a pasty, hollow-eyed desperation. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, and I almost asterisk, felt a flicker of pity. Then I'd remember his threats, his campaign to ruin me, and that flicker would die real fast. I laid out my terms. It wasn't a negotiation, not really. It was a rescue, but a rescue with ironclad conditions. Whitman and Sons would merge on paper with JW Buildworks. My clients, the ones keeping his sinking ship afloat, would officially become part of a new, restructured entity. He'd get to save face, avoid immediate financial ruin, and probably jail time. But the price was steep. "You're out of CEO, Brendan," I said, watching his eyes. The fight had completely drained out of him. He just nodded, deflated. "Effective immediately, Dad will step in as interim CEO to oversee the transition, to make sure things are stabilized properly this time." Dad, who'd been quiet, just looked at me, then at Brendan, a complex mix of emotions playing across his face. Relief, sadness, maybe even a sliver of grim pride in me, I hoped. Brendan had to sign over controlling interest. He'd be a silent partner, a very, very silent one, with a minority stake that he could, eventually, be bought out of. He'd have no say in operations. No more aggressive growth strategies. No more gambling with our family's name. Watching him sign those papers, his hand trembling, his signature a pale imitation of his usual confident scrawl, was intoxicating. It wasn't the fiery explosion of revenge I might have fantasized about in my darkest moments. No, this was different. This was a cold, calculated dismantling of his entire power structure. It was the quiet satisfaction of watching a bully strip of his bluster, finally facing the consequences of his own actions. His arrogant smirk, gone, replaced by the bitter taste of ashes. That, my friends, was a victory far sweeter, far more complete, than simply watching him burn to the ground. He had to live with it. He had to live with Asterisk cleaning up his mess. A year later, I stood in the steel skeleton of a new JW Buildworks high-rise, the wind whipping around me, the city sprawling out below. The air smelled of welding and wet concrete and honest-to-God progress. Whitman and Sons, under Dad's steady hand and my operational oversight, was slowly, painstakingly being rebuilt on a foundation of actual value, not leveraged lies. It was smaller, leaner, but it was real asterisk. Brendan? He was gone. Took a payout for his remaining shares a few months back and disappeared. Last I heard, he was consulting somewhere down south, trying to find his own way, or maybe just trying to outrun the shadow of his colossal failure. I almost hoped he'd learn something, but honestly, I didn't waste too much mental energy on him anymore. He was a ghost from a past I'd moved beyond. Looking out at that skyline, the tangible proof of what I'd built, not from tearing someone else down, but from building asterisk up asterisk, I finally understood. The deepest betrayals, the ones that cut you to the core, they don't have to be the end. They can be the goddamn bedrock for something stronger, something truer. The best revenge, it isn't loud and destructive. It's quiet. It's building a life, a legacy so solid, so damn successful, that the person who tried to destroy you becomes nothing more than a footnote in your much bigger, much better story. And that, right there, felt like the most profound victory of all. So there I was, a year down the road, standing on the bones of my newest JW Buildworks project, watching that steel climb right into the clouds. And it just clicked. That gut-wrenching, soul-crushing betrayal. It wasn't the end of my story, it was the damn beginning of a better one. You can take all that twisted metal, all that hurt, and forge something even stronger, something true. Brendan? He just vanished. Took his payout and disappeared into the background noise of my life. And you know, the real kicker, the thing that settled deep in my chest, wasn't watching him crumble. It was this success. Building something real, something with integrity, while he was just gone. That's the revenge that actually matters. Not tearing them down, but building yourself up so high they become insignificant. Yeah, that quiet, solid victory. That's the one that truly heals.